From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Sean Thompson. And this is the Sean Thompson Show.
This looks like a job for me, so everybody just follow me, because we need a little controversy.
See, the trick that the government doesn't want you to understand is the policy intended to fail. The phony virtue wrapped in a policy intended to fail so that the profiteers of this policy can continue to fund their own personal wealth. That's how people who have never worked a day in their miserable existence all retire worth tens of millions of dollars. My next guest works tirelessly to expose this. He is the director of research at the Government Accountability Institute, which is something that a government that doesn't want to be held accountable hates. He's also the best-selling author of at least 2, possibly 3 books. As I am reading his new book, the new book is called Oligarchs, Exposing the Billionaire Class, Their Secret Deals, and the Globalist Plot to Dominate Your Life. He is Seamus Bruner. Seamus, thank you for joining me. How are you?
Sean, it is such a pleasure to be with you.
Well, I've been admiring you for a long time. I love the way you approach things because you follow what needs to be followed, the corruption, the money, and the fact that they have been getting away with this for decades.
Yeah, that's right. We follow the money. That's our motto at the Government Accountability Institute. The numbers don't lie. And, for Oligarchs, we followed it all the way to the top, the globalist elites. And what we found is shocking, really. I mean, it's unsettling stuff. The things that they are investing in, people like Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates. Everybody knows that they added tens of billions of dollars to their personal net worth over the course of the pandemic while we're all locked down and our small businesses were closed and crushed. Our kids' education suffered. They got filthy rich. So that's not shocking. But what is shocking is the way that they are making this money, constructing tyrannical systems that are just now starting to control every facet of our lives. I mean, from energy to food, information, the book gets into all of it.
So COVID, in my opinion, was the perfect weapon to use against the principles of Americanism. It was the one weapon that did more than any foreign enemy could have done to this country. It literally shut down the businesses that the government deemed not important enough to stay open. It is fascinating to me how tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people had the course of their life thrown over. What you do in this book that's fascinating is you actually go into the numbers, and there was a number in your book that I found amazing. 160 million Americans were thrown into poverty because the government's take over their lives during COVID. Do I have it right?
That's worldwide, 160 million.
Oh, worldwide.
Yes,
okay, worldwide.
Yes.
Because, what America did, and I fault Donald Trump for this, is they tried to imitate the velocity of a private economy with government debt and throwing it out there. Now, I'm from Chicago, where the greatest scum actually is the government. And we now have investigators that are proving that in courthouses in downtown, 63 employees were found guilty of fraud in PPP money. That's just one. We've got a 2-bit municipality where one guy had 25 checks go to the actual police department. He was a copper. And, this kind of thing, I think the Republicans should have known. But do you think that maybe the scandal is so obvious and so much evidence of thievery that for once the American people will wake up and start to pay attention to it?
Wait, so you're 63, that's it?
In one building. It happens to be a courthouse in downtown Chicago.
Okay, one building. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
No, I think it is obvious. I mean, the American people are smart. They know what was happening. I mean, the question is what we can do about it. I mean, certainly the pandemic was profitable. The lockdowns were lucrative. But the worst part about it is, and you hear people say this all the time, the pandemic's over. Let's stop talking about the pandemic. This isn't a pandemic book. This is a blueprint for the future. I mean, the climate lockdowns are coming. The shutting you into high-rise buildings called 15-minute cities, that's in the works. And digital ID, just last week, Bill Gates and the United Nations and other control oligarchs hosted an event called 50 in 50, how they're rolling out digital ID without a vote in 50 countries within the next 5 years. Then, speaking of 160 million in poverty, I mean, what AI is set to do to this country and around the world is just frightening. I mean, it will reduce people to a universal basic income. I mean, the estimates range, jobless estimates range from 40% upwards of 80%, according to one AI expert in America. So the AI is coming for your jobs. Microsoft is leading the way. You may have seen the news today that they just hired Sam Altman from OpenAI, that's the ChatGPT maker.
Yes.
He says that the job losses are coming. And so when you're reduced to a universal basic income, who knows what you'll have to do? I mean, a lot of Americans did things they didn't want to do because the pandemic forced it on you. So it was a blueprint. The worst is yet to come in a lot of ways from these guys, and they need to be stopped.
Seamus, what I like about your book, and I'm not through it, admittedly, I just recently bought it, but what I like about it is you lay the groundwork that this isn't something that's new and really it started after the implementation of COVID. This is something that the already American oligarchs that we denied for years, that were in the positions of power, have actually worked on for decades. And you lay this out, and really what I found interesting is you go after one family specifically, who I trace back to the 70s, and a problem after the Park Avenue Summit with Richard Nixon and his meeting with Nelson Rockefeller. It was at that point that the bureaucracy and the Leviathan really came into sight as the schematic for bureaucracies was laid out and implemented by a Republican, Richard Nixon. He's the one that started EPA, OSHA, and the Department of Education was his idea, even though Carter signed it. So that's what I love about it. You go back throughout history and you show how the plot was always this version of what I call Fabianism, this oligarch-run system, and that's the control oligarchs you're speaking of. Now, how do you get in this club? Because it's a fascinating club. Do you just have to be demonic in your idea of controlling the population? How do you get in it?
Well, that's a good start. And so, I'm glad you mentioned this family, the Rockefeller family. I mean, I, like most people, had thought, well, the big tech oligarchs, these are a new breed, and the people like the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts, those were all the good billionaires. All they did was build schools and libraries and such. And that's certainly true of many people. I'm not anti-capitalist by any stretch. I mean, there are plenty of good billionaires out there, but the Rockefellers in particular, I'll just read this quote. I put it at the beginning of chapter 1, and it really sets the table for the rest of the book. Quote from David Rockefeller: "Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as, quote, internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it." So there he is in his own words, and I try to get as many direct quotes as possible, because you go back, a full century, and look at what the Rockefellers have been up to, whether it's the funding of Margaret Sanger's Birth Control League, which is now Planned Parenthood. They've been funding that since day one. They funded all of the research into some of these abortion pills and things that are, this was never about women's rights, just on that specific issue. This was always about population control. They say as much. I mean, the writings are pretty clear. Margaret Sanger wants to pull minority groups out of the ground like weeds. Yeah. And so, you go back 100 years, they've been doing this kind of stuff that's really, really sick, and they're doing it right through to today.
You reminded me in your book of Reverend Gates, not Bill Gates, but Reverend Gates, who was hired and profited from Rockefeller trying to build their image in the same way Bill Gates tried to build his image in the 90s. Most people forget in the 90s, Bill Gates was not only thought of as the most perfect nerd ever created by capitalism, but he was also a link to a lot of mafia tactics in that sphere of Silicon Valley. And he hired a PR firm, and they polished him up as a lovable nerd who was an accident monopolist, not really a monopolist. And it worked. And my question to you is, when you're done with the book, because I'm not at the end of it, when you get through it all, Is it really an autopsy of the collapse of Americanism, or can it be saved?
Well, I got to the end of this book and writing it, and I was pretty demoralized. I mean, it's heavy stuff. You think, what can little old me do up against these forces of trillions and trillions of dollars? But also, I have faith in the American system, and I have faith in the American people. We do not comply, a good chunk of us, and we're able to fight back against mandates to the point where they relented during the pandemic on some things. Now, it's going to take hard work, and the first step is you got to spread the word. But I have faith that we can prevail through all of this. I mean, one of the things that gives me a lot of hope is just you see it everywhere. Americans and people around the world are craving authenticity. You see these AI videos come out. Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, they want you to live in your house, never leave, and just be surfing Facebook all day. But you see more and more people waking up, turning off the screen time. You see the AI videos, and when some people are like, oh, this is so cool, a lot of other people are saying, this is creepy, this is weird, I want to see real life stuff, I want to go outside. You see it with the fake meats. They want you eating, these fermented fungi patties or lab-grown hamburgers made stuffed full of chemicals. But the lab-grown meats are flopping. The fake meats are flopping. We're not going to let them take our cows. There's nothing like a good, juicy steak. Yeah. So, time will tell. We don't have a lot of time, and we got to wake up.
Well, what's interesting is the common denominator of the controligarchs, which I used to refer to as oligarchs, but I really like controligarchs. And what it is the idea that the population is too much and too big and it must be controlled. One of the most fascinating statistics about America is that it's only 6% developed. This is something that I think American people need to start discussing. And the plot to control us isn't just through population direct control, but this idea that they are going to use the fraud of climate engineering and eco-Nazism to control our own development of the country. But we still are based in property rights. I think, ironically, what might help us is I don't think AI is going to go along with the lie. And they've already seen some pushback on some of their policies, where AI is starting to sound like a conservative talk show host on my station, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And anybody who thinks that the United States is overpopulated hasn't flown in a plane over the country ever. And we go through, the Earth is not even close to overpopulated. I mean, if you were to pack everybody as tightly as they live in Manhattan or, in any other big cities, the entire global population could fit on the island of New Zealand, and the rest of the world would be completely empty. So overpopulation was really the first iteration of the whole climate change psyop, and that was in the 60s. And then they realized, well, people eventually get to the question, well, what are you going to do with us? And it doesn't go over so well. So they moved on to global cooling. They moved on to global warming. Eventually they arrived at climate change, which all of these are totally unfalsifiable. Whenever they release the data, you find that it's been messed with. There was faulty modeling. Oh, they've got to revise the figures. And so the whole point of it is all about control. And we get into how climate change is all about seizing control of the energy sector. I mean, oil and petroleum-based, carbon-based fuels are totally efficient. That's why it's cheap and abundant. Instead, they want to force you into a patented system where everything is, solar. You can't have any wildcatters or Jed Clampetts in the solar and nuclear energy space. It's by default got to be mostly monopolized because of how regulated and tightly controlled it is. And so that's what it's all about. It's about taking control of the energy sector, a $1 trillion sector. Same thing with the food and the fake meats and the flatulating cows that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is always griping about.
Yeah,
so,
talking about flatulating cow. In the meantime, you kind of expose something that gets lost a lot. I've been talking about it a lot since the beginning, and the implementation of this fascism in the name of alternative energy. Big oil owns it all, and they like the alternative energy because they don't really have to do much. It's 5 times the profit. It's like the Neiman Marcus of energy, and it's the same fracking companies. This is something that I think a lot of people who thought themselves Democrats, those morons who don't vote and don't read and don't think, but vote Democrat because they think it's John F. Kennedy's party. These people are going to start to wake up and say, well, wait a minute. These are the same companies. They're doing less work, and they're making 5 times the money. Do you think there's some skin in the game, some attention gathering there that might wake up the people who are step and fetch Democrats?
Yeah, I mean, they just need to look at who's got all of the patents. I mean, the patents are the key to a lot of these control schemes. And the left likes to talk about the millionaires and the billionaires. Well, all of the millionaires and billionaires are buying up all of the companies that are with patented technologies, and they're the ones who change their logos to rainbow flags during Pride Month. I mean, they really do need to wake up. I mean, they claim to be against corporations, but then they align with them perfectly.
Yeah, it's like feminists celebrating and on the side of Palestinians. They have no idea what they're asking for. But what's funny is you go through some of the oligarchs and the profiteering of the control oligarchs, and it was staggering. Bill Gates is a fascinating caballero. He made a lot of money on the pandemic. But what I was surprised at, you also go into Soros, the cousin of the devil. He didn't really make as much money. Was he just a little late on the uptick, or was he busy with his kid and the painted nails? What do you think?
Yeah, well, Soros is in it for he's in the long game, and I wasn't even sure that George Soros would make it at 93 years old. He's not looking too good. So we went into each of his children, and so his dark money empire. I mean, there's a new heir. Everybody's heard about Alexander Soros, but what they haven't maybe heard is exactly how radical he is. He's going to be spending this $25 billion dark money slush fund on elections and abortion, or I guess as he calls it, women's health, for the next 50 years if he lives to the age of his father and if America lasts that long.
Yeah.
But, Soros, he's good at the shell game. So that's just what Forbes reports and what his SEC filings report. There's no telling where.
Made a mere $300 million. He used to make that trading. I mean, he's really slipping. In the meantime,
exactly,
Gates,
he's hovered around $25 billion for like a decade. So some of these guys like to stay off the Forbes list, and they've got a number of ways they can probably do it.
But the one who made tremendous money was the creep from Epstein Island known as Bill Gates. He made money on the way in, on the way out, and he's still making money. And if he should be successful in the proper speculation of the next pandemic, he could maybe double his net worth, couldn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we calculated for every dollar Bill Gates gives away, he gets 2 in return, and it doesn't appear because he's tithing. So he's pretty good at giving away money and getting it back twofold. Now, what he spends his money on is actually developing the technology that he then personally invests in, and also the foundation will put out white papers. If you think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez dreamed up cow flatulence as a thing that's going to kill the planet, no, that comes from a Gates Foundation funded or World Economic Forum funded white paper. Well, what is Bill Gates doing with his personal money? He's investing in all the solutions. You may not think that you've got too many problems, but Bill Gates is here to tell you got a lot of problems. He can solve them, and it just so happens that his solutions all enrich him.
Seamus Bruner, what you're good at is exposing this by following the money. You and all of the people that are at the Government Accountability Institute, we all owe you a debt of gratitude, but the book is absolutely fantastic. I am thoroughly enjoying it. However, you didn't sign it. The book is called Control Oligarchs, Exposing the Billionaire Class, Their Secret Deals, and the Globalist Plot to Dominate Your Life. He is Seamus Bruner. Thank you, Peter Schweitzer, and everybody, please, at the Government Accountability Institute, for not just me and the people that work at the station, but for the entire listening audience, because if we win, it'll be because you're exposing the scam, the fraud, the phony virtue wrapped in a policy for profiteering. Thank you very much.
Sean, thank you so much. That comments like that make it all worth it, and your signed copy's on its way.
I love it, brother. Thank you. I can't wait for the next one. Thank you.